Hi everyone, welcome to Notion Automations to level up your workspace. I'm so happy to see you here. Feel free to type into the chat where you're from, how long you've been using Notion, and introduce yourself. If you'd like, you can also let me know if you've used automations before in your Notion. And I'd like to also go over today's event itinerary. So today we're going to be going over an introduction and then followed by what are Notion automations and then how to use Notion automations. And after that, I'll explain all about Notion automation pricing and common questions that you might have about it. And then after that, there'll be a Q&A and then I'll show you how to download various freebies and more information. So let's first go over the introduction. So my name is Sara and I've been using Notion for several years now. It's my tool of choice and I just love the way that you can do so many things in Notion, from things like habit tracking and personal things, and then you can organize your entire business with it. So the Organized Notebook specializes in designing Notion templates that help you optimize your workflow, organize data, and increase productivity. Feel free to check out the website and template store. There's a lot of freebies and free resources for beginners to get started with Notion. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the link into the chat. And a few notes about the event. Feel free to add comments and questions into the chat. Please keep the conversation respectful and about the event. There is a lag with YouTube Live, so I'll answer most questions at the end, but please type in your questions and I'll make sure to go through them. And just a friendly reminder, this chat is for discussing about the event and Notion related topics. Messages not related to these will be moderated and removed as needed. So let's go over what are Notion automations. So have you all used Notion automations? Feel free to type into the chat your experience with it if you use them. Notion automations are action sequences, or specifically Notion database automations are what we're going to be talking about today. There's also button automations as well, but we're going to stick to Notion database automations. So they're basically action sequences that occur inside of databases. And when you assign a trigger, you can assign actions which would occur based on that trigger. So for example, if you have a status property for, let's say, a task database, and when a certain status changes, you would change the assigned person property. So let's say that you have a workflow where when a task goes into done, you need to make sure to change the assigned person so that that person knows what to do next with it. So in this case, which is the trigger and which is the action, the trigger would be the status property being changed, and then the action is that the assigned person property is going to be edited. So here are some more examples. Let's say a task status changes, you assign it to a specific person. Let's say when you add a page to a Notion database, you send a notification in Slack. Whenever a property is changed, you can edit a page property in another database. And why is this useful? So if you're already manually changing multiple properties, when something changes in your database, this could be the feature for you. So specifically, let's say that you always notice that when a task goes into in progress, you always have to manually assign it to another colleague. So if you start noticing these patterns, it's a really good idea just to add that Notion automation in, and then it's going to just do it for you. So this is basically why Notion database automations are so useful. And they've also updated this feature a lot recently. So you can also send emails using these Notion database automations, and you can also do things like have recurring triggers. So you can, for example, add a page every week and things like that directly with Notion automations. Hi, ETG Design Studios. Happy to have you here. And hello, Will Jeffers. Yeah, great to hear that you're all enjoying Notion. And yeah, automations are definitely a very useful feature. So next, let's go over already diving deep into how to use Notion automation. So if you're already familiar with automations, this part might be very basic, but we're just going to go from the very basics all the way to some more advanced use cases. Feel free to follow along in your own workspaces if you already have Notion automations, and also go over who can access these and what sort of pricing plans and the status is with the Notion database automations after this section as well. So first, let's go over the basics of using automations. So the very first thing is where to find it. So to find a Notion database automation, you can go to any database. So here we have a sample database, and then you can go to this lightning bolt mark here. So if you click this one, you can already start creating an automation. You'll notice that you can name the automation. So let's say I add a sample name here. You can choose for what database. So sample database is the one I'm doing. And you can also see the different views here as well. And then you can set a trigger. Let's say that whenever any property is edited, I'm just going to do something very basic. Let's say we are going to send a Slack notification like this. And I would choose a Slack channel. So I could just do general. I can even add custom messages here. And then I'm just going to enable this. So now that I have created one automation, then if you click the automation here, you can see this automation show up here. And what you can do with this automation from here is that you can deactivate it. So you can see that it's paused. You can turn it back on, you can edit it, you can duplicate it, and you can delete it. So those are all the options for basically what you can do with the base Notion automation. And the next thing I wanted to talk about is that you can also do view-specific automations. So just as I showed before, if you go to the three dots here and you go to edit, you can see that this one is for the entire database. But what's really interesting about these Notion database automations is that you can also, for example, duplicate this view. And let's say that we only want to see tasks assigned to, let's say, Mary's tasks. And we're going to filter the person by Mary. And now I can actually run automations only for Mary's tasks. So we could go here and edit this one. And then we can go ahead and go to sample database and then Mary's tasks like this. So you can also do interesting filters here as well. I found that this can be useful sometimes to solve some situations where you want a specific automation to work. So yeah, definitely try this out as well, or just have the automation on the entire database. So that's the very basics of using automations. And now we can get started and kind of build up from there. So the second thing I wanted to cover is just slowly, gradually increasing the complexity of the automations. So the next thing that you can do is when any property is edited, you send a notification. This is something I sort of showed before already, but basically if you go now to the automations here, I can delete this one. And let's say I create a new one. And the first one is going to be any property edited. So we can just go here, any property edited. So this means that anything that gets changed on the properties, it's going to trigger that automation. And we can add a new action, which is to send a notification. And I'm going to choose Slack notifications here, but you can actually also send notifications through mail. You can also send direct notification through Notion as well. So those are new options to send mail specifically. I think this one's really cool. But yeah, you can do Slack channel. So I'm going to do general. And so whenever a property is edited, so you can send a notification. So let's say that tasks have been edited. And I can't really show exactly what that notice looks like, but yeah, you can imagine that you get this message into your Slack channel and then enable. And so let's say that I change this task to John, like this, then it's going to trigger that automation because I've changed a property and edited it. Nice to have some newcomers here. Glad to hear that you've enjoyed the videos, and welcome from the Philippines. Can you send notifications through other emails besides Gmail? Unfortunately, right now it's only Gmail, so you connect it to Gmail when you want to set that up. You can do Notion's native notice. So if I go here, you can see that you can add, let's say here, you can send notification to. And if you do that one, then as long as you have set up everything correctly, you would be able to get the notification also to your email that you've connected to your Notion account. So if you don't use Gmail, I would recommend trying this one out, send notification to, and then you should be able to get email notifications. Otherwise, you can also set up more complex things through things like Zapier or Make using webhooks. This is also a new feature, but this one is a little bit more advanced. So I hope that answers the question. So yeah, now we have when any property edited, send notification. And yeah, that's the most basic one you can add. Then the next one is when page added, you send a notification also. So this one's also very useful, especially if you want to be notified when there's new pages added, if you're working as a team and want to manage things. So this one, you just click new automation. Then here we would put the trigger page added. So when the page added to sample database, then the new action is going to be to send a, let's say again, Slack notification. But of course, you can use Gmail or Notion's notification system. So now I can do this. And I think the custom message is quite cool as well. You can do things like mention a person, page, or date. You can also edit it as formulas. So yeah, you can enable that one. And now if I add a new page, it's going to send that notification over to Slack. Welcome, Patricia. Yeah, welcome. And yeah, so that's the when page added, send notification. The next one is going to be a relatively new thing that you can do with Notion automations, and that is that every week you can add a new task. And this doesn't have to be every week. This depends on what you need. But if I were to show what happens, let's say that I delete these so that it's cleaner here. And what I can do is now click here. And then when you click the new trigger, there's this every. And when you click every, you can choose the frequency. So I've also covered this in my other deep dive video about Notion automations, especially the new features that I'll be sharing with you at the end of this. But what's really unique about this is that you can actually set up automations that don't necessarily have to do with the specific database. So for example, if I click every week, then I can add page 2, and then it allows me to select any database. So obviously for this one, it's applying to this sample database that has been created. But let's say that you want something to happen every week in all kinds of other places. You can also have one automation for all of those, or you can send emails to yourself. There's a lot you can do with this one. Let's say that we have a weekly task here, and you can also edit the property. So let's say that this weekly task is always assigned to John. Then you can add something like this as well. And you can also set the status. So this one is not started, but if you wanted it to be in another status, you can choose that here. And then we can just enable it. So what this means is that if we go here, you can actually see when this is going to be triggered. So every 1 week, at around midnight, starting tomorrow. And you can then see the occurrence time here as well. So all of these are really useful. And you can also set up different days. So there's a lot of flexibility here as well. So the next one is going to be one that I actually personally use really often. And this is that when you set a status property to done, you can set a completion date. And to do this, you can make sure to add a date completed property to your database. So if you're interested in how to do that, you can go ahead and click the three dots here and then go to properties, and then you could go to plus new property to add a date property. So you could have a date and then you would name it date completed. And once you have that property, then what you can do is to then change the automation so that when the status is done, then it would set a date completion. So let's go ahead and add a automation here. So I'm going to delete this one and I'll add a new one. So the trigger in this case is going to be that we want the status. So in this case, you would go to the properties section here, and these properties are, you can basically add what you need as a trigger. So in this case, it's the status. And what we want is that when the status goes to done, we are going to set a specific date. So I'm going to remove these and only have it as complete. And you might be wondering, why is there to do, in progress, and complete with these checkboxes? So if you have multiple statuses in done, then you can choose either to group them as complete or only have it on this done here. But since we only have one status, it doesn't really matter whether we have complete or done. And then we can set it like this. So once we have that set, then the new action is going to be to edit the property, which is the date completed. And then we want it to be the date triggered. And then we can enable that. So what that means is, let's say that I have this task here and I've completed it. So then I can set it to done. It's going to go ahead and set that completed date to today. So now it's set it to today. And yeah, in general, I really like this feature. The only thing that you need to be careful of when you add this automation is that it only goes one way. So if you set it to done, then it's going to put the date completed, but sometimes we all make mistakes. So if you put it back to not started, then the date still remains. So in this case, I would also recommend considering adding another automation, which is that you can go backwards, just in case that you make a mistake and accidentally mark something as done. You can actually then clear the date if the status goes back. So let's say that if I go here and I add a new automation, I can add the new trigger, which is that if the status is not done, then we can set the date completed, and we can pick a date and we can clear the date. So clear date completed and then enable that. So that means that you can actually revert it. So I would recommend also considering that as well when you add automation, so that you have all these things in consideration in case that, especially if you're using it as a team and someone might make a mistake. So let's say I put not started, and if it works properly, it should clear the date. And it cleared the date. So yeah, that's for the status property done, set completed date. And you can do this for all kinds of things as well. So let's say that you want a date where you edited the person, or a date when you completed a certain thing within the properties. You can set dates for that. So now we're getting a little bit more complex territory, and the next thing we're going to be doing is when you have one trigger and then two actions into one automation. So the one trigger and two actions into one automation is going to, for an example, be status change, and then we're going to set the person and also send a notification. So if we click here, and let's now clear these up. So now we have a a clear automation list, and we're going to do the status change as a trigger, and then we're going to set the person and send a notification. So the first thing we'll do is to set the status. So let's say that whenever a task goes into review, it should be assigned to a certain person. So we're going to do in review. And then the new action is going to be to edit the property. So that's going to be the person. Let's say that this one goes to Jim. And then we're going to add another action, which is to send a notification. So I'm going to go ahead and do send Slack notification. And I'm going to do, let's say, updates channel. And we have it here. Just to show you a little bit more things that you can do, you can go to here, edit as formula. So whoever triggered it could be added here. You can even do things like showcase the trigger page dot, let's say, name, like this, so that it's going to show that custom message. And then we could do something like this as well. So you can do a lot of things here with the custom messaging and enable. So now if we change the task status to in review, it should now set the person. And now it set the person correctly. So yeah, that's another way you can do one trigger and two auto actions. And you can actually have lots of actions. So there's no real limit to how many actions you can add as far as I know. I've never tested the limits, but yeah. So the next one is going to be, let's say you have multiple triggers to one action. And when you have multiple triggers, you actually have various options on how those triggers work together. So let's say that we want to change the status and when the specific person is assigned, and then you want to send a specific notification. So to do this, you can go to, again, the automations, and we're going to edit this one. So this time we're going to add two triggers. So the two triggers are going to be, let's say we keep in review, and let's say that the person is, say it's Jim, since we did that before. And I'm going to delete this one and delete this one as well, and plus new action. And now what we can do is we can send that notification like this, and we can put an update. So when it's in review and the person contains Jim, then it's going to send the notification. So if I click done here, so when the task is in review and it's Jim. So I'm actually going to add a new task here just so that we can see this. So it would be the person is Jim and the status is in review. And since you can't see the Slack notification going on, I'll also do another action as well so you can see it clearly. So I'm actually going to add another property here, which is going to be a date property. And we're going to have the date property be date went into review. So then we can track the progress. So actually, I'll just name it into review. So you can track all of the dates. And then I'll add that to the automations. So if I go here, edit, so not only will it notify the updates channel, I can also add an action to edit the property, which is the date it went into review. And I'm going to have that as date triggered. So done. So now if we just go over what this should do. So when all triggers occur, so status is set to in review and person contains Jim, then we want the updates channel to be notified and the date triggered to be the date that it's set into review. So let's try this one out. So in review and gym. So we're gonna do a new page here and task 3. And we're going to do gym here and in review here. And then it should do this into review. So there is a window of time where you have to do these actions relatively quickly, simultaneously, for it to trigger it like this when you do a automation, which is this all. So when it's all, you have to do the in review and gym pretty quickly, close to each other, so that it works properly. So if you were to do in review and then an hour later switch it to gym, there might be some issues with it actually updating like this. So the next thing is that we can do any. So the any is basically if it's set in review or if it contains gym, then it's going to do the updates date triggered. So just to test this one out, we can simply choose this task. And let's say that I just choose it. Actually, this is not a good example. Let me add another task, task 4. And if I open it up, then let's say that I put it in review. So now it should also change the date here. And also because it's any of the triggers, if I do task 5, and now let's say that the person is Jim. And again, it set the date into review on that day. So that's another way that you can use multiple triggers. And in this case, there's more options because basically you can set any and also all triggers as well. So now we get into more advanced cases. And this is that you can automate items in relational databases. So what this means, I've already created this in advance just to speed things up a bit. But let's say that you have a projects database and you have a tasks database, and these databases are connected with a relation like this. So then what happens is that when you change the status, you're going to add specific task pages. So this is useful. I made an example here. So if I edit this one, is that when the tags is set to in progress, so that's the status here, then we're going to do template research, draft template, review template, and template testing. And all of these are going to be added to the task database as soon as you put the status to in progress. So what this is kind of mimicking is the workflow. Let's say that as a template creator, if I'm going to create a template and I want to launch it, then I need to do all of these tasks. So this can also apply to like YouTube videos as well. If you want to publish a video on a certain day, you know that there's certain tasks leading up to it, scripting, filming, and so on. So if we just put this into action, what that looks like is that, let's say that I'm going to start a new template. So a business template, and I'll put Notion template. And then if I put the status to in progress, then what it's going to do is going to add all of these tasks immediately. So I need to do template research, I need to do template testing, drafting, reviewing. So these are automatically added for me as soon as I put them in progress. So I can do another one here. Let's say personal task Notion template, and I decide to actually act on this project, then I do in progress. And again, it's going to do the same tasks, but it's going to be linked to the exact project that we have here. And sometimes there can be a delay here. So in that case, it's good to check the automation here in case the trigger isn't working, but it should eventually have those tasks. So I would recommend trying this out as well, but this is more advanced, and also you don't necessarily see the pages getting created, especially if you have databases in multiple different parts of your workspace. So as you can see now, they loaded, and you can see all of your tasks here now and the different projects. And this gets clear if I go here and then group it by project. So you can see all the tasks, and usually you would hide this one so you don't see that, and you just see the tasks here. So now if I show the database here again, I can quickly walk you through how to utilize this and create this yourself. So the first step to creating this kind of relational database with the automation would be to add that relation. So you would need to create the project database and a task database. Once you have that, you can click the plus sign here and then look for relation. And then you would need to look for the task database here to connect the two. And then I would recommend doing a two-way relation so that you can see the pages on both sides. So that's the first step, which we've already done. And then the next step is going to be to go to the automation. And the trigger, as you mentioned, was to do the in progress. As soon as it's in progress, you would have a action list, which is to create pages to the task database. To create one of these, let's say that I'll add another one here. So we did template research, draft template, review template, template testing. Let's say that launch template is another task. So I'm going to do plus add page to, and then I'll add the task database here for that. The name is going to be launch template. And then I'm going to edit the property, which is the related project database. And that's going to be the trigger page. So the page that triggered it. And then I can click done. So now let's say that I have another one, launching template for, let's say, project management. Then if I do now in progress, it should now add that additional page as a task to all the future ones that you add. So here you can see all of the ones here. So that is basically a more advanced case for automating items in relational databases. So the final advanced case that I wanted to add is about using formulas for due dates. And formulas are also one of the more advanced things, and also a new feature that Notion added. Previously, you couldn't do something like this. So I think this is very exciting. And this one is particularly useful for this kind of workflow where you have these tasks that are always the same, especially when you're doing a certain thing. So whether that's a new project that you do, there's always a certain workflow, and you know exactly the time progression of when those dates should happen prior to the launch date or the date something should be published. So if we go to the advanced cases, and now we do using formulas for due dates. So again, we have this database, which is the projects and which is the tasks. And in this case, what we're going to do is to add formulas for due dates. And I'm actually not quite sure if I have the same exact database here now. So I'm going to do it in this section here. Actually, this one. Yeah, so this one I'm going to edit so that I can show you exactly what this means. So the first step is to add a due date. So let's say that the task database is now going to get a due date. So I'm going to do due date. And then what we can do is to first clear this out. So I'm going to clear these out. And then what we can do, now that we've cleared them, I'm going to do none here. So now we have the name, tags, project database, and the due date. The next thing I would recommend to use this is that in the projects database, we would add the sort of due date, or in this case, maybe this is a launch date. So I'm going to add the date here and call it launch date. So what this is trying to achieve is that it's going to add all of those tasks with the correct time frames up until the launch date. So let's say that so I'm going to put all of these to not started. So let's say that you're planning to launch this business template on a certain day. So I could put, let's say, June 24th. And when it's going in progress, just like before, then I want the actual tasks to have specific due dates relating to this launch date. And to do this, you can use formulas. So I'm not going to do all of them because that would take a lot of time. But just to show you, we're going to now edit this automation. So we have template research. Let's say that the template research should happen maybe 2 weeks before the launch date. So then what we can do is edit property, go to the due date, and then you can go to the custom formula. And the next step is to go to the trigger page dot, and then we see launch date. So now we can manipulate this launch date into different ways. So since we want this to be 2 weeks before this deadline, we're going to do date subtract and then trigger page dot launch date, and we want it 2 weeks before. So I'm going to do weeks here and save. So now it's date subtract trigger page launch date minus 2 weeks. So now we have that. Then what we can do is to, let's say, if I'm not going to do each one specifically, the most important could be when you launch the template. So that's going to be the date that you want that you've set here. So I'm going to do custom formula. And this one is very simple. You can just do date trigger page dot and then launch date and then save. So I'm just going to show these two examples. You can, of course, fill every single date. Let's say that you want to do the testing a week before, the review like 6-7 days or 8 days. You can be very specific on when you want each of these tasks due dates to be set up in advance. So I'm going to click done, and then we can test this one out. So now that I have a launch date, I can also put launch dates for all of these so you can see. So what should happen is that 2 weeks before this deadline of the launch date, the first task should have the due date. So I'm going to change this to in progress, and we can see what happens. And just so it's clear, I'm going to also group these. So by project database. And now you can see that the launch date is 24th, and exactly 14 days before on June 10th is going to be the template research. So you can set the dates dynamically based off of your timeline. And I think this is one of the most useful use cases, especially if you want to streamline your workflow with tasks and projects with formulas. So I have some questions here. So Eliza asked, each of those tasks added when a project is set to progress, you can also set their properties as needed. Yes. Yeah, so you can set each of those properties very specifically. So I don't have too many properties here for the tasks database, but if you did, you could go to this here, edit, and then you can click here to see all. So I could even set the tags here with custom formulas as well. And even after the automation has run, you can also go ahead and edit them as needed. So the automation might not solve all of your needs for what you want for the task. So after that, you can also add new pages. You can edit the tags as well. So yeah, hope that answers your question. So the next one is general tips. So I generally don't recommend using automations across two databases, formulas, or also variables. I didn't show it to you all this time, but I would recommend checking out the video for that, because there's just so much with the variables as well. If you want to know what that is, if you click plus add action, you can define variables, and that can sometimes allow you to access certain things from the, for example, trigger page, and then you can even sort of map out a situation where when one database gets updated, you can sort of sync the other database using the variables. But I would recommend checking out the video for that I have here, which is all about database automations and a deep dive on the new stuff and also the advanced things. So I'm going to also leave that link there as well. So this one is the video. And yeah, glad to hear that you like the date launch use case. Yeah, I think it's one of the most useful use cases, and definitely applies to all kinds of different niches, workflows, businesses as well. So yeah, the next tip I have is use automations for property changes that are reflected in multiple properties. Analyze your workflow to determine the best automation. So I think the best automations come from when you feel like you're doing something all the time the same. So that's really what the automations are there to solve for you. So you always realize, whenever this goes into review, I'm always assigning it to Mary. So why don't I just add that automation in? Or if you always manually add a completed date when it goes into done, things like that can definitely be automated. It's also useful when you want certain information, like the date completion. You can get even more information when you do things like that. And I've also noticed that with the date completion, it also allows you to show things on Notion charts. So without that completion date, let's say if you have like a habit tracker, then you don't necessarily see your habit progression unless you actually have the date that you completed it. So those are ways that automations can really be useful. So yeah, be sure to check out the deep dive database automations video if you're interested in that. So next, I wanted to go over the pricing and also some common questions. So Notion automations are only available on the Plus plan and higher up. So if you have a free plan, what happens is that the pre-built automations inside templates and in other people's workspaces are going to work for you, but you just won't be able to edit the automations or create new ones. So those are sort of the limitations with that. But as long as you have Plus plan and higher, then you will be able to use the automations. And the next thing is some frequent questions. So you might be wondering, how frequently is the database scanned for changes in properties? So database automations work over a 3-second window. So for example, within this 3-second window, a user can remove a trigger, delete any changes, resulting in no property change to the automation. So that's something to keep in mind, is this 3-second window. As you probably saw, there's also a bit of a delay for the automation to work sometimes. So yeah, that's just something good to know. Do automations work on pages in the entire database or pages in a single database view? So either one. During the creation process, you can specify if the automation should run on pages in the entire database or in a specific view. If any filters in that view change, the automation will then apply to the adjusted list of pages. So yeah, this is also something that I actually personally realized a bit later, is just the fact that you can have filtered databases and then apply those automations on top of that filtered view. So you don't always have to apply the automation to the entire database. You can have a specific list of items with a certain filter. So the next is a Q&A. Feel free to type into the chat if you have any questions about Notion automations. I saw many of you already had some questions in the chat. So, but if you have anything else, feel free to type them in already into the chat. Great. So looks like there's no questions. So I'm going to go to the next one, which is that you can feel free to download freebies through the Organized Notebooks freebie collection. I'll leave the chat for you into the chat. So here it is. There's a lot of nice resources in here. For example, things like basic habit trackers, but also some more specific things that could be useful, like a equation guide so that you can customize your fonts and things like that. If you're interested in one-to-one coaching sessions and custom services, feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm more than happy to help you through those. Here's the link for all the services. And finally, there's also currently 40% discount with code MADE40 for premium templates, and 30% discount with code LEARN30 for different course tiers if you're interested in those. So I'll put the links to those as well. If you have any questions or comments after this event is over, feel free to send me an email to organizednotebook.info@gmail.com. I'm super happy to help anyone out if they have any specific questions about, for example, automations or anything else with Notion. And yeah, thank you so much for attending today, and I hope to see you all in the next event.